Yeah, I got it.
All right, so the school has what's called an honors program, right? And so when you graduate through the honors program, there's scholarships, and it was really good when you're trying to transfer. It's a special kind of program for students that show academic promise, but there's more work that's involved in it. And as part of the honors program, each student that's part of that program have to designate certain classes as what are called honors classes, which means that you not only do the work that's required in the class, but you also do an extra project in addition. And Byron designated this class as an honors class. And so what he decided to do for his project was to look further into the Sapir-whorf hypothesis, that concept that I introduced at the beginning of the semester, the idea that language creates meaning and doesn't just define it. But what he ended up finding out, I think, and he'll discuss this in greater detail, is that there's a second side of that, and it's called linguistic determinism. And that's the idea that we are born with a certain innate way that our language shapes basically what we see. And it's more of a definition and less of a creation when we use our language. And so he did a project where he did a lot of research, comparing and contrasting the two different types of theories, and he created a pretty extensive research essay. It was really well done. I haven't got the final copy yet, though. I'm going to be getting it soon, I'm assuming. Okay. And also, he, as part of that, is going to present on that to you guys today. So this is his class. So please pay attention. Take notes if necessary. This is also part of the class as far as stuff that you're going to be required to know. Right? So you may come in contact with this when it comes to the final. And be ready and willing to ask him questions afterwards. So we'll
Feel free.
see if he actually knows what he's talking about. And I will sit down over here. Soda. And we'll call the student.
Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of rehash.
Do you need it? Does it work?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, hello. As I hope you all know by now, my name is Byron Kouris, and I'm a member of the Central Arizona College Honors Program, not to be confused with the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society, the National Society of Leadership and Success, or any other designations afforded to the CAC student body. The CAC Honors Program requires students to complete 2 full class length, about 3 hours every Thursday, colloquial segments, known as Honors 204 and 205. The colloquial segments are extremely rigorous. Within Honors 204 and 205, students complete a full undergraduate research project on a chosen topic, while simultaneously completing critical analyses on assigned texts and pursuing constructive activities outside of school and writing about their synthesis to one's education, mindset, and goals in the form of enrichment papers. After completing the colloquia series, students must then proceed to complete 3 more honors designations, Honors 201, 202, and 203, or seminars. These seminars combine a core class or elective class and the honors seminar trifecta. The combination appears upon transcripts as an honors core class. The seminar projects can be creative, but must also be academically substantive. I am currently enrolled in Professor Moulton's Honors 201 class, or seminar, as well as Professor Silvia's English 102 course. The topic for my first seminar project is linguistic theory and reality. Okay, to preface, oh, can you see it? On TVs, okay. Okay, to preface, I'd like to provide cursory definitions for these terms. What is schema, logic, and perception, and how do these terms relate to one's cognizance of the sensible world? Schema is an amalgamation of representative patterns. Essentially, schema is every experience, interaction, and observation made in a human being's lifespan. Schema is memory, and schema has firm footholds in primality. Fire is hot, hot is bad, I will not touch fire again. The example of fire can be made abstract, and modern logic can take credit for future avoidance, or the example can be claimed by physicality, nature, or instinct. Logic is subjectively modern. as logic could be fused with schema, which is a possibility I will address later in my presentation. And logic is generally considered an individual's thought pattern, which is emphasis, based upon, not directly fused as purported previously, schema, which is past experience or memories. Logic is generally cemented, and usually, as to avoid hasty generalizations, the only way to shake or shift an individual's thought process is through extreme distress, trauma, surprise, intimacy, and so on. How does all this affect how one sees the world? Schema and logic form perceptions. Perception is how you view something, and is the lens through which you see the world. Example, schema developed within Nazi Germany will generally set the foundation for thought processes which denote Jews as distasteful, bad, and so on. What is the Sapir-whorf hypothesis? The Sapir-whorf hypothesis, or the idea of linguistic relativity, encompasses nurture. The theorem asserts one's lens, with regard to the previously mentioned, is developed over time and through interactions with peers, environment, and metaphysical perceptions. Linguistic determinism, the opposing thought group, asserts the opposite. Nature. Linguistic determinists purport that individuals' values, cognition, perception, idealism, so on and so forth, are all pre-programmed, and that human beings develop within a figurative petri dish of sorts. Okay, before I dive headfirst into Wonderland, I would like to establish some exegesis and provide a brief history of linguistic relativity and determinism. So, linguistic relativity was proposed by anthropologist Edward Sapir in 1921 and later revisited by mentee, chemical engineer, and linguist Benjamin Lee Whorf in 1956 when he performed his research upon indigenous Hopi tribes in the Americas. Whorf asserted that the Hopi did not perceive time, certain physicalities, and relationships as modernized, Eurocentric, and chronologically proportional individuals did. Despite the proliferation of Whorfianism in Mr. Whorf's and Mr. Sapir's time, linguistic theory finds genesis in early Germanic Romanticism. The aforementioned is exemplified in a quote from Manuel Swedenborg in the Arcana Coelestia. Everyone according to his language, according to their families, as to their nations. This signifies that these were according to the genius of each, according to their language, according to the opinion of each. Language, and its inner meaning, signifies opinion, thus principles and persuasions. This is because there is a correspondence of the language with the intellectual part of man, or with his thought, like that of an effect with its cause. Swedenborg. Times and dates are not superfluous when it comes to the review of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, as Sapir and Whorf never expressly published a collaborative work or statement with sole pertinence to linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity quickly fizzled out because of its vague and grandiose assertions. However, linguistic theory in general received a revival in discourse around the airing of the cinematic film Arrival, as modern intellectuals scrambled for answers. Arrival proposed a dilemma to Cartesian thinkers. The protagonist's conflict perfectly illustrated the possibilities and applications of linguistic relativity. Louise, the main character, learns that she cannot communicate with the heptapods without encroachment upon a communicative means that is unquantifiable to her. Louise eventually overcomes the fictional conflict through inadvertent realizations that the alien's linguistic constructs in perpetual realities were beyond her circumstantially limited human comprehension. The alien language perfectly exemplified the limitation of our modern stratified comprehension. The aliens perceived time in a completely different fashion. Their footholds of sensible experience were in the past, present, and future all at once. The alien language conveyed one thought or experience which closed in on itself from different quantum angles simultaneously. Arrival sparked again an age-old controversy, the controversy of Whorf's Hopi and their perceptions. Modern intellectuals cannot perceive what the Hopi did, let alone experience their reality, which furthers the seemingly paradoxical nature of linguistic relativity and the dissonance or dichotomy between nature and nurture theorists. Linguistic relativity and determinism is not without implications. Cultural stratification, somatoform disorders, and so on are interestingly correlated with language and communicative mediums, deterministic screening, etc. as well, however I digress. Okay, so what does all this mean, and what are all these academics trying to say or prove? Linguistic theory is an attempt to decode thought, perception, and by relation, existence itself. Existence is perception. If you cannot see, hear, feel, smell, or taste, do you exist? Schrödinger put it best. A cat, a flask of poison, and a radioactive source are placed in a sealed box. If an internal monitor, like a Geiger counter, detects radioactivity, a single atom decaying, the flask is shattered, releasing the poison, which kills the cat. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics implies that after a while the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. Yet, when one looks in the box, one can see the cat is either alive or dead, not both alive and dead. This poses the question of exactly when quantum superposition ends and reality collapses into one possibility or the other. That which is perceived is. If our environments or our programming affects how we perceive, then by relation the aforementioned affect how we exist and how others exist. Before continuing, I would like to state that as a side note, I do not intend to offend or posture. I respect all choices, orientations, and values, and do not intend to imply or suggest a change or need for change. Linguistic theory influences cultural strata, logic, and is best exemplified through factors of socialization. Religion, or as Karl Marx purports, the opium of the people, directly inscribes moralities, ideals, and values upon impressionable youth and other vulnerable peoples. Moralities, ideals, and values are integral facets in the process of cognition. Another example, legislature, which acts as literal, formative, deterrent language, which is then granted physicality in officers who then uphold the aforementioned laws. Laws deter, laws are language. Language forces you to act and perceive with regards to morality in a specific, socially interested way. The language, laws, controls your perceptions, ergo your reality. Perceptions truly are subjective and personalized within reason. However, the statistician in me would undoubtedly suggest perceptual overlap is completely possible, and multiverse theorists would surely assent. I digress. Returning to focus, however, mental health, culture, circumstances, and so on can all forge how one sees the world. The more similar a culture's spatialities, circumstances, and so on, the greater the societal synthesis and agreements. The more one assimilates to their culture, the stronger their synthesis with peers. The more one synthesizes with their peers, the more their subjective realities become common, and obviously less subjective. Modern perspectives and values are leading the world towards communism. No, not communism. Communism is the belief or practice of over-the-top unity. Communism was originally a proposition for utopia prior to the publishing of the novel 1984. A communistic society is one in which all are perfectly equal, perfectly like-minded, perfectly monitored. Individualism is punishable and something to be feared. In a communist society, there is only we, not I. And as I near the end of this slide, I'd like to establish some examples of linguistic determinism and relativity which are more digestible. Existentialism, which is extremely broad, is the contemplation of one's existence, which is essentially defines against the insurmountable tyranny of reality and paradox. Where one sees answers, existentialists see paradox. How can we exist if we did not exist? How can there be something if there was nothing? How can there be nothing without something? Existentialists, or at least in my interpretation and practice, endeavor to understand the truths of reality, whether it is string theory, a computer simulation, or all a dream, which is essentially the nurture argument, as it implies one can rise above his culture, his reality. And then, for opposing thought, ethical egoists predicate all assertions on the surety of reality. We are real, and we are self-interested. Self-interest is the most basic and powerful instinct within the human spirit. Everything the individual does is out of self-interest, functional or otherwise. Ethical egoists assert that self-interest is inherent, is transcendent, and cannot be combated or denied, similar to the nature argument. And wrapping up here, there's no clear answers as of yet. There are serious flaws and issues in the arguments of each side. Existentialists are too vague and manage to say everything and nothing because of the paradox of language and knowledge, which is that it only has value to us, human beings, and is therefore inconsequential to the universe and its existence. Subjectivity and anecdotes hurt arguments as well. The possibility that everything you know, think you know, want to know, and never will know could all be wrong makes assertions, passions, and research nearly pointless. However, the opposite applies as well. What can you take from this presentation with regards to its implications and applications? Be critical, practice Cartesian doubt, and remember, we have to cease to think if we refuse to do it in the prison house of language. For some closing remarks, thank you all for your time, attention, and patience. Now before we resume our regularly scheduled class activities, I want to make a serious point in thanking Professor Silvia. Mark, you've been my academic idol, goal, and mentor. You've been my greatest nightmare and my greatest resource. Thank you for your patience, your willingness to help, and your zest in the pursuit of knowledge. Your class, you Your insights and your ideas have been an integral factor in the development of my writing, ideas, and identity. Mark, thank you. Class,